We've got a major news update on Miles Bridges and his status with the Charlotte Hornets. Plus, the Hornets get another West Coast road trip win. We have David Walker in the studio to discuss that and more on the Locked On Hornets podcast. Let's do it.
You're Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
This is Locked On Hornets. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for making Locked On Hornets your first listen every day. We are free and daily wherever you get podcasts. That includes YouTube, where you can see the smiling post-Christmas haze face of David Walker, my fellow dad. This is a full dad pod now.
That's right.
We ejected Walker. He'll be back later this week, but we ejected Walker for a full dad pod edition of the Locked On Hornets podcast. I'm Doug Branson. You can get more of my stuff on my substack, Every Hornets Boxscore.com. He is David Walker, the Sultan of sneakers, the King of kicks. How you doing, buddy?
I'm good, man. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year, Doug.
Did you get any good sneakers under the Christmas tree? Did Santa deliver any good sneakers?
No, I gave some. It's really more about giving. And now I gave some. Here's the funny thing. I gave some. I like to give a pair to each son. And I gave it to my youngest, and he just looked at me and said, "I wanted Crocs." And I said, "I have failed miserably as a father."
Oh, wow. I got right to your heart. I mean,
he goes,
did you just exile him at that point? Did you just say something?
I just he also did get Crocs, but that was crushing. But I had a good Christmas otherwise.
Okay. Well, our children are destined to reject us. That's sort of the whole process of growing up, is they find the one thing that you love and then they shatter it. That's just kind of how it goes. All right, let's get to some serious news. On Friday, ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski reported that the Charlotte Hornets and Miles Bridges are, quote, gathering traction in talks on a new deal, and optimism exists that an agreement could come in the near future. Miles Bridges is currently serving 3 years probation after pleading no contest to one felony count of injuring a child's parent. The NBA continues to investigate, and many believe that he will be suspended as soon as he signs with a new team. David, we've discussed this a lot on the show, some with you, some with Nada, some just Walker and I. And we've been pretty unanimous, I think, that we believe, I'll just speak for myself. I believe that he committed the acts that he was initially charged with. I couldn't get past the images that were released by his partner after the incident, Michelle Johnson. And I thought that the ultimate outcome of the legal case is more reflective of the difficulty in holding domestic abusers accountable more so than his guilt or innocence. I was also clear that I didn't want to see him play for the Hornets again. But saying all that, Walker and I we did an episode several weeks ago, and we agreed with James Plowright of Sports Illustrated that we felt, after multiple weeks, that this signing was going to be inevitable, that the Hornets were pursuing this. That was what we were hearing whispers of. And now here we are on the doorstep with this report from Woj. My question to open this segment is, if the Hornets do indeed sign him with the intention to play him at some point in the future, what do you think the front office's risk-reward calculation looks like?
I'm a little baffled by it because to me, I don't know what the ultimate reward is. And it feels kind of weird to say this because you're right. You guys have been all over this, Doug, and you guys have done a great job covering it and have kind of prognosticated how things are going to play out. Nada did as well. James Plowright did as well. And a lot of people covering the situation have. It's weird because I felt awkward. Initially, I was like, well, if they were in the running for a championship, it might make more sense, which feels gross to say. You know what I mean? Like, just given the weight and
right.
the heaviness of the situation. I'm sure the Hornets are just weighing. That was their only plan, Doug. Clearly in the offseason, last offseason before all of this went down, and they don't have a lot of other options. They don't have a lot of other ways to add. Or at least they don't choose to go those routes.
They don't feel they do.
Anything.
It seems like, with the inaction in the offseason, that they don't feel like they have that. But I honestly, I feel like at this point, and I'm just talking in reality now. You can go, if you want our feelings on the court case and the situation around Miles Bridges. I mean, we've talked about that. Now we have to talk about it just in terms of what the Hornets are choosing to do now. And I feel like the risk reward calculation is from their perspective is that you are getting a discount probably. I mean, it's not going to be a $100 million deal, which is what Woj was reporting that another team was prepared to offer him before all of this happened. I mean, you could speculate that's probably Detroit or Indiana, who Indiana was going after DeAndre Ayton with that same kind of money. Detroit was certainly interested in pursuing a player that could jumpstart their rebuild. So that was what the number was going to be. I think it's pretty obvious that the number's not going to be that. And the Hornets were intending to match any of those offers. So you get that kind of player on a discount. The risk is all from a PR perspective, and you can sort of see them telegraphing what they're going to do from this report, saying that they were going to, they're prepared to, essentially have him go out into the community and speak about this and try to rehab that image a little bit. But I don't think they see this as a big risk because I feel like they think that the NBA commentariat who are going to roast this deal, your Zach Lowe's, your big names are going to think this is gross, but they already they don't like the Hornets anyway because of Michael Jordan's ownership, because or they don't care. They don't really pay attention to the team. So I think, and then there's going to be a small percentage of the fan base that does peel away and say, all right, I'm not going to support this. I'm not going to go to games anymore. But their reward calculation is that if they bring him in and they start winning again, that, most of the fan base or the casual viewer is either not going to know about this, or if they do know, they're going to care more about winning. And again, all of it that we're talking about here is weird and gross, but it's kind of the reality of the situation, I feel like.
Oh yeah, and that could be next year, right? I mean, were there any numbers or thoughts around how long the suspension would be? I didn't see any factual hard ones out there.
No idea. That's a great question. The write up here sort of makes it sound like the deal is going to happen sooner rather than later, just to start the clock on what would be a suspension from the NBA. But there is no guarantee that we know of that when Miles Bridges signs with the Charlotte Hornets or any team, that the suspension would happen immediately, although you would think that any team pursuing Miles Bridges would be in communication with the NBA and say, hey, can you give us a heads up here? Like, where are we in the investigation? When can we expect that to happen? So you would think that was happening, but I don't expect him to play this year. Would you expect him to play this year? I don't.
No, I haven't. But you mentioned that. I mean, it sounds like this may happen before the new year, right? I mean, they dropped this, or it was leaked the day before, or Friday before Christmas. Classic news drop. But you're right.
That's the other thing I want to mention before we get out of this segment. The timing of it. I mean, the timing of the leak. It happens Friday, right before Christmas. Half the country is on ice, literally. Nobody's moving around.
It was Friday afternoon too. I mean, it was late in the day, I believe.
Miles Bridges attended the game against Los Angeles that we will, by the way, talk about in the second segment. The Hornets get a win in LA. We'll talk about that coming up. But he was in attendance for the game. He was talking to several players after the game. So what do you think about the timing of the leak?
Oh, well, I mean, they were hoping they would not create much buzz. You know what I mean? Now, that was obviously a news dump to me. I mean, they're pretty good at that. They've done this before in the past with other various news leaks and whatnot. But
and we should say we don't know. We don't really technically know who leaked it, but
right.
As several people have pointed out, Woj, Shams. If Shams had leaked it, you would want to assume that was coming from Clutch because he leaks a lot of Clutch, and Clutch represents Miles Bridges. Woj doesn't really get a lot of those types of leaks. So again, a lot of assumption happening here. But you would think this is coming from the team, especially with some of these details about how they are going to sort of rehab the image of Miles Bridges and go through some PR hoops.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you're right. I think they're just hoping that the majority of folks will, not remember, forget, or choose to just move past it once he does get back on the floor. It may be, like we said, over a year from when anyone has seen him play basketball, right? And throughout this whole thing, it's been covered here. You guys have covered it. People around Charlotte have been watching over it, but I don't think the league as a whole, you're not seeing much of this on halftime shows or. It didn't get much coverage. And that's also interesting, Doug. I mean, I think that's come down from the league. That's been communicated that, hey, we're not going to talk about this a lot. It's not covered on podcasts. It will be, I guess, once he signs, either gets back on, but I don't think that's going to be a big, hit either. You're right. There's going to be some people slamming this. That would have happened with whomever signed Miles Bridges because he was going to be signed by someone. That's just the way of sports, and that's just the way what you guys have talked about. So the Hornets are just banking on that. They see, look, from a basketball standpoint,
I don't want to let the Hornets off the hook here. I mean, not all all organizations operate like this. The Hornets are choosing to operate like this. Some organizations do distance themselves from these types of incidents and types of criminal activity. I mean, they do distance themselves. The Hornets are choosing to go down this road. Here was the paragraph I was looking for from the Woj report. Bridges and his representatives with Clutch Sports have been in consistent contact with the Hornets organization, and the sides are working together on Bridges' plans to work with local domestic violence groups and community organizations to start reacclimating himself to the Charlotte community. Here's what I'll close with. We haven't heard anything from Miles Bridges on this after this court case ended. So, we don't have anything from Miles Bridges in terms of taking responsibility for these actions. And certainly through the litigation piece of this, he doesn't admit guilt. So I don't know how they're going to really go through this plan without, why would he be speaking to local domestic violence groups if he didn't even admit guilt in the court case? I think that's going to be super interesting for them to figure out how to navigate. And I don't know if you really can figure that out. And so it's all very interesting. We'll obviously keep paying attention to this story and update you on the show as it develops. But we have to talk about this win for the Charlotte Hornets against the Los Angeles Lakers.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
That's coming up on the Locked On Hornets podcast, plus another injury to a big rotation piece. We'll talk about that as well. But first, want to tell you about a special message we have from the NHTSA. So here's the situation. You're hanging out with some friends, putting back a few drinks. A few becomes too many as the evening comes to an end and people start to head out. You think of calling for a ride. But nah, you live nearby. You can make it home okay. It's no big deal. What are the odds you're going to get pulled over anyway? And even so, what's the worst that could happen? Your insurance goes up, you lose your license, you lose your job, you total your car, you kill someone. Everyone knows about the risks of driving drunk. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel while under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roads to save lives. So if you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, think again, play it safe, and plan ahead to get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. More with David and I on the Locked On Hornets podcast ahead. Thanks so much for making Locked On Hornets your first listen today. Make your next listen Locked On Sports today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. David, one more question on this Miles Bridges news update. I had a few people ask me on Twitter if I felt like that this news would be followed by news that the Hornets were involved in some sort of trade for Miles Bridges. So do you think that that's what's going on here, that this is more of a sign and trade and Miles Bridges will actually not suit up for the Hornets?
No, I mean, my guess would be not, because it seems like that would involve, more teams, more talk, more direction from the league, if I'm, you know what I mean? So I think the Hornets are doing this for their own good. I mean, plus, when's the last time we saw the Hornets involved in a trade that was impactful, really, of any kind? This would be a pretty big one, trading away your second best player. And, you know, from that standpoint, like, I mean, the market's got to be pretty low, because I'm not sure there's anybody else willing to reach out for that. So no, I would think he's going to be a Hornet when and if he suits up again.
I agree with you. I think that's a great point, that they don't make a lot of in-season trades, so it would be shocking just to see them kind of make a big deal like that. But also, I think it would be difficult to get any assets back from a team, because a team that takes him is going to have to deal with the suspension. So, you know, I think a team would be more likely to just put up an RFA offer. And we haven't seen it. A team at any point could have put up an RFA offer and made the Hornets match, and they haven't. There hasn't been that interest. So, yeah, I don't really believe that this is part of a future trade. Also, within that leak, you had, as I read in the first segment, they are preparing to have Miles Bridges go out into the community and try to sell this signing to Charlotte. So I don't know why you would start to work on that if you felt like this was part of a trade.
And if the reaction from the players, you know, which we saw a little bit after that Lakers game, is any indication, I mean, or any hint of how just like the locker room or the team as a whole kind of views him coming back, I mean, you know, there wasn't much pause there. So it certainly seems like you wonder how much of those conversations have happened in the locker room, or what the talk has been throughout this whole thing, whether it's just been like an inevitability. Obviously, that would be hard to say. You know, at some point during this whole process, but like, I just mean, like, it feels like the team has always thought he would be back. You know, I don't know if the feeling from the players went all the way up to the front office and vice versa. But it doesn't seem like he would be traded at this point.
No, absolutely. The player, I think there's not a doubt in my mind that the majority of players on this roster support Miles Bridges coming back to be part of this. They're friends with him, and they voice support. I mean, Terry Rozier has voice support for Miles Bridges. LaMelo has stated his desire for him to be back with the team. So there's no doubt about that there are sources of power, both I think from players to teams to organizations, that don't deter this behavior via their support for it. And I think that's certainly an issue, especially if we see it happen again. I mean, God forbid it happens again. And then I think what's unfortunate, if it does happen again, is that I think people will then turn to those same sources of power, including the team and the league, will turn to, well, this player was just irreparable. They were just a monster. When really it is, I think, harmful to give people who commit these acts more power and more money, and that inherent support can lead to these kinds of things happening again and again and again, which is what we see in the NBA. When you don't take something seriously, when the punishments don't deter the actions, they keep happening. So that's all I'm going to say on it for now. Again, I'm going to write a little bit about it on everyhornetsboxscore.com, and we'll keep talking about it as the news develops and when and if he does actually sign. But let's now shift gears over to the Hornets that are on the court. They got a win against the Lakers in Los Angeles, their second straight game at Staples Center. This one didn't come easy. Final score was 134-130. Big offensive game. That was in regulation, by the way. Didn't go to overtime. Almost went to overtime, though. The Charlotte Hornets survived a fourth quarter Lakers comeback led by LeBron James's 18 points thanks to a clutch offensive rebound putback. What else, David, is going to win them a game? This one, from an unlikely source, I guess, Gordon Hayward getting that putback. It was called a goaltend on LeBron. And then LeBron had a chance to tie it up, but lost his shoe. Blown tire, blown game. Hornets get their 9th win of the season. What do you think of their performance against the Lakers?
Any way you can hang on against a LeBron James team for this franchise specifically, it doesn't matter how they do it. I mean, historically, they just have not been able to get over the hump against LeBron, no matter where he is, no matter who the Hornets have, no matter what the state of their season is. So to see them go out there and play, and to see, you know, LaMelo continue to perform, you know, on the biggest stages, in clutch situations, and the return of Terry Rozier, right? I mean, they're really seeing this team finally have pretty much their full arsenal of players healthy, and obviously that makes a big difference. Look, the Lakers are struggling. There was no Anthony Davis in this game, but you look at the way that LeBron and Russell Westbrook play. It's just such a it's such an opposite to me when I watch this game, because those guys are full bore the whole time, and I was like, well, this is not going to go well, because these guys are just going to keep coming, and at some point the Hornets are not going to be able to hold them off and pull out this win. But man, you got a little lucky there, I guess, with LeBron coming out of his shoe, and they did just enough.
Shoe? I mean, obviously he wears his own shoes, right? So that's not a great endorsement for the shoe.
Big time. Anytime something. It's the best shoe he's had in years, too, Doug. It's a low top, though. It's a low top shoe. It's a lot more like a Kobe. I know. But the offense, Doug, I mean, the Hornets were shooting the lights out in this game. That's what kept them up. That's what kept them ahead. And it did allow them to win the game. Such a weird inning. I mean, they didn't make a shot to win the game. It was a goaltend call, right, on the Gordon Hayward putback, and then they held on. So, did you stay up for this whole thing? It was like 1:30 when this thing was over. Of course,
absolutely.
What am I talking to here?
It's called Every Hornets Boxscore, David. That means I cover every single one of these things. But they were shooting well. I mean, 39% from three. That's pretty great for what the Hornets have been doing this season, which is not shooting the basketball very well. 16 made threes, 4 of those coming in the fourth quarter. And you mentioned Terry Rozier helping them, 2 made threes in that fourth quarter. He's come through. PJ Washington actually led that fourth quarter with 10 points and led the team overall. This was a much needed comeback game for PJ Washington, who shot 8 of 13 from the field, 24 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, got off to another rough start. It seems like PJ Washington, I wrote this down in my notebook. It seems like PJ Washington takes like the first 4 or 5 shots of a game and misses them. And then, he has continued to miss, but then in this game, he actually gets it back on track, which definitely helped the Hornets. But let's turn to the guy that we all want to talk about, which is LaMelo Ball in this game. 23 points, 8 assists, 8 rebounds. He has 3 steals, 4 turnovers, only 3 personal fouls, stays out of foul trouble. 9 of 22 from the field, 4 of 12 from 3. Not his most efficient game, but he does have a big shot in the fourth quarter. What did you think of LaMelo's performance? Really overall, David, I don't think we've had you on since he's been back. So what have you thought of LaMelo's time since he's returned for the second time this season?
Yeah, I mean, he's been electric, and he obviously improves the team a great deal. The thing for me that's been a little surprising, I think, is how fast he's gotten back up to speed, because that first time he came back, I think it was the third game or so, it was a little rusty coming out of the gate. And that may have been the case this time, but once he's gotten up to full speed in this run, he's just been really, really good. The 3-point shooting has been dangerous, and he is pulling up from deep. That one in the Lakers game you mentioned was from close to half court, it felt like. But those are clutch. Those are key. The defense is still not there. I'd love to see him be able to stay in front of a guy like Reeves. I feel like you can do that. But that's
Reeves,
just
don't underestimate Reeves. I mean, he's good.
I'm not.
I mean, he's been
LaMelo
really the only thing LeBron can count on lately.
That's true. LaMelo has the length, though, and you think he could be able to move to stay in front of some of these guys at some point. But look, he's been awesome. He's doing what this team needs him to do, which is run the show, hit big shots, and if he can just stop the fouling, stay in these games, that's really going to help him. But yeah, I've been impressed with the way he's been able to get back up to speed so quickly and just change what this team does, make them so much more watchable, make them so much more fun. Those 6 starters, really, with Oubre counting, they all played 30 minutes in that Lakers game, and they leaned on him heavily. But yeah, I've just been super impressed by LaMelo. I started to think maybe could he make a late run at the All-Star game? It's probably too late, but he's been so good.
Well, you never know with the voting, but he didn't get a big push from the vote last season. So yeah, I think he would need the coaches at this point. I don't think he's played enough games, but he is throwing some really amazing highlight plays out there. He got by LeBron a few times. He threw a baseball pass, I believe, to Oubre after his own steal in the second quarter. That was a beautiful play. He was quickly attacking Schroeder, which I love. Like, I want to see more LaMelo quickly attacking the guard and getting to the rim a little bit faster. And so I love that. He was getting downhill in this game. He had this great reverse layup where he froze LeBron. LeBron could have come over and tried to get it on the weak side, block it, but he froze him because, LaMelo is so dangerous under the basket. You don't know if he's going to pass, but he decides to shoot it, and great shot there. And then again, fourth quarter, he just makes the team faster too, right? I mean, that's the whole thing. But LeBron, that comeback, yeah, totally. LeBron, that comeback, 18 points, really 20 points if you count the goaltend. But 18 points for LeBron in the fourth quarter. I knew this was going to be trouble, David, when Jalen McDaniels hit him with a hard foul and LeBron started bleeding. I think his lip was bleeding. You can't look.
You can't make him bleed his own blood.
I don't know if you remember Mick Roberts hitting LeBron that one time, but you can't make LeBron bleed his own blood. You just can't do it. He's gonna take it. He's gonna take it personally, and he certainly did. In this game, but you get a good PJ game. They needed that. They need a third. They need a third big scorer to step up. LaMelo, Terry, and then they've got to have a third guy each game, whether that's Jalen or Kelly or PJ. This was a balanced scoring attack, though. Really, 24 from PJ. You get 23 from Terry. LaMelo added 23. Gordon had some good defense in this game. All around good game. 6 rebounds, 4 assists, 15 points, and knocked down 1 3. So, it was a good game offensively, but defensively they did struggle. I want to talk about that. Plus, there was an injury in this game that we have to cover. It might have a big impact on the team. That's coming up on the Locked On Hornets podcast. But first, I want to tell you about our friends at BetOnline. They've been with this podcast a long time, been supporting us. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and even esports. They've got it all at BetOnline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. Add that to your repertoire. They are always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. You can head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. More on this game in LA ahead on the Locked On Hornets podcast. More thoughts on this game, this win, 134-130. We've really paid a lot of attention in that second segment to the 134 number that the Hornets put up, but the 130 I think is a little disturbing against the Lakers, not a team that has been fantastic scoring the basketball this season without Anthony Davis. Russell Westbrook goes 6 of 12 in this game, hits 2 3-pointers, 2 corner threes. He gets 17. But listen to these numbers too. Austin Reeves, 20 points. You mentioned him. Gabriel had 13 points and 5 offensive rebounds. They continue to struggle to rebound the ball. But what I want to shine a light on is the fact that this is the second straight game at Crypto.com Arena in LA. They get blown out by the Clippers. The Clippers go small and absolutely eviscerate the Hornets. The Hornets have to go small in this game because Nick Richards gets hurt. We're going to talk about that injury in just a moment. Right ankle sprain. And they go small against the Lakers, and they get eviscerated again. David, what's going on here? They can't. We thought that Steve Clifford wasn't going small because that was just kind of not his ethos, right? I mean, he likes playing a big that can keep guys out of the lane. But I think it's because their death lineup is death for their defense.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to see that. I mean, especially you mentioned Clifford, but look, there's just not a lot of stoppers out there. I mean, when Kelly Oubre is your best perimeter defender, right? It's going to be trouble. And he's been pretty good this year. We talk about all the deflections and stuff, but they're going to have to outscore people for the most part until this height situation gets fixed. But I mean, where are you getting the defense from, Doug? I mean, who's locking down anyone? No Dennis Smith, obviously. No Martin out there. And now no Nick Richards maybe for a little bit. It's going to be a struggle. They're going to have to shoot the lights out.
Yeah, so if you are watching on YouTube, I've got some numbers here on the screen from Cleaning the Glass. This is every lineup they've run this season with P.J. Washington at the center position. Not a lot of possessions. Again, Steve Clifford going to this really out of necessity only. We saw him hold Mason Plumlee as long as he could against that small lineup against LA. He did that a little bit against LA when they decided to go small as well. So only 87 possessions. But you can see right here, the point differential on those 87 possessions is negative 37.6 points per possession, points per 100 possessions. That is not good. I mean, your score on all of these lineups, your points per possession on offense is 98.9, under 100 points per possession per 100 possessions. That's not good. And then over 136 on defense. You're giving up a ton of points. Just for some context on defense, they have a bad defense, but they've only been giving up overall as a team 115 on one of the worst defenses in the league overall. When they go small, that number skyrockets to 136. And the small lineups, David, that actually play well on defense, to your point, are the ones that feature Dennis Smith Jr. It's why having him out has been a little devastating to their defense, because his on-ball pressure is really key to allowing some of these small lineups to survive on defense. But when you go P.J. Washington, LaMelo Ball, Terry Rozier, Kelly Oubre, Gordon Hayward, only 8 possessions, super small sample size, but the differential is negative 160 because your points per possession on defense is 285.7.
That doesn't seem real.
So they're getting the overall point here is that they're getting drilled when they go small. So there's been some questions like, hey, why don't you try PJ Washington at the center position, or why don't you go a little bit smaller every once in a while? I think the answer is they can't without Dennis Smith Jr. So
yeah, it's got to be driving Clifford crazy. Among the many things that I hope he's taking some time for himself over these Christmas holidays on this trip to just kind of zen out, because that's got to be a huge frustration for him. But we didn't think he was going to come in and make this team, the bad boys from Detroit and start knocking people around. He's held them in check a little bit better, but you can only do so much, I think, with the tools that you have out there.
But the point you're making, the point, which is that Dennis Smith Jr. was someone that we didn't even know if he was going to make the rotation,
right?
Because we didn't know what he had left in the tank, and he came in and gave them an element of, again, on-ball pressure and intensity on the defensive end that really suited Steve Clifford, but also I think inspired a team without LaMelo Ball to start honoring the defensive end of the floor, because they knew their offense was going to suffer. And when Dennis Smith Jr. left with an ankle injury for the second time this season, which we always knew that injury issues, have been an issue for Dennis Smith Jr., so the reliability wasn't going to be there. When he went out for the second time, they stopped honoring the defensive end of the floor, and it continues. And now I think you're getting a look at what this team would have looked like with Steve Clifford having to re-engineer the defense, because to me, this team is playing exactly like they played under Borrego. Let's high octane. We're going to try to score as many points as possible, shoot the lights out, and defensively just do just enough at the end of a game to get a win. That's what carried them to 43 wins last season. And, but Steve Clifford obviously wants to try to change that, because he understands that kind of play doesn't win a play-in game. It gets you blown out of a play-in game like they did the past 2 seasons under Borrego. But as I mentioned, David, they had to go small against LA because they lost Nick Richards, and they played Mason as long as they could and then had to go small to match what LA was doing. And Nick Richards goes down with the right ankle sprain, does not return to the game. He's listed as doubtful for this game tonight against Portland. What does it mean if Nick Richards has to miss multiple games?
I think, for me, I've enjoyed watching him play, and it's been a call for him to play or start, in some circles. So I think it's.
Does it mean more Mark Williams?
I don't think it means that. Do you?
We haven't.
That would be a surprise. That would be a surprise.
Yeah, but I haven't gotten any notifications about a call up from the G League. So I don't think that you're going to see Mark Williams tonight, but you might. You never know. It could come very late. but I haven't seen that. So I think it's going to mean a lot of Mason minutes and some small ball lineups you probably with Maladone. I think if they go small, they might try to get Maladone in there with that small lineup because he does, and maybe LaMelo and Maladone, because at least Maladone gives you a little bit more of an ability to stay in front of a guy. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what they do against Portland.
Yeah, Nick Richards has been such a real revelation in some senses this year, just becoming much more consistent. So it stinks to have him out there. Another ankle injury, Doug. I mean, is there any other kind for this team? It's staggering.
Yeah, and this one again was a freak thing. He was jumping up and landed on an opponent's foot and sprains the ankle. We don't. Hopefully, pregame we'll get some indication as to like the severity of that injury. But you're right, a double machine at times off the bench. He was starting to get back into a groove. He had fallen off. His offensive aggressiveness had really fallen off several weeks ago, but he had started to kind of get back into the groove. And so this is a big loss for a Hornets team that is used to big losses. We're getting some news on Cody Martin's status. It looks like he's getting closer. Dennis Smith Jr. has been doing more and more, but I think they're taking ultra precautions on the ankle injury because a third ankle injury for him would probably mean the end of the season. So they're hoping that they can get him back fully healthy. We'll have more updates on the injury status for everyone tomorrow when we're joined by Nada Edwards. But yeah, this one's a tough one for Nick, and it's going to, I think if it's long term, it does mean more Mark Williams. I think they'll be forced to call up Mark Williams. Yeah, they'd almost have to. Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of people listening to this podcast or watching it are screaming like, it should mean more Mark Williams right now. Like, why not see what you have in him? And I think there will be more and more calls for that, if they continue to lose games. But so far, 2-2 on the West Coast road trip, and things are looking a lot more winnable. I mean, Golden State, no Steph Curry. They did get a big win on Christmas, but they've been losing games lately without their leader. So that game looks a lot more winnable. Portland tonight is going to be tough. I mean, there's no way around it. Portland is very, very good, and they have some weapons there that are going to be very tough for the Charlotte Hornets to guard. But we will recap that game tomorrow. David, thanks for joining me day after Christmas. Really appreciate it.
Hey, thank you. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. Season's greetings to everyone out there.
All right. We'll have more. Thanks for making Locked On Hornets first listen today. Make your next listen Locked On Sports today, from the games that matter the most. The biggest stories in sports go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights that only Locked On can provide. Thanks to David. Walker will be back on Wednesday. I'm joined by Nada tomorrow. Make sure you check it out. Go Hornets. Go America. Let's swarm sharp.